Yo, Cardi B just got dragged into the messiest courtroom blowout hip-hop has seen all year, and it wasn't even her trial as a hair braider took the stand and buried the whole narrative Cardi was clinging to while exposing what Stefon Diggs was really doing behind the scenes of the woman cooking his meals and washing his sheets under his own roof. And before we get into this avalanche of receipts, you already know what to do. Smash that like button. Subscribe and turn on notifications because the story you thought you knew is about to flip upside down and inside out, and by the time we finish connecting every single dot, you will never look at celebrity scandals the same way again. The internet is in shambles, the Body gang is in hiding, and Cardi went live looking like somebody just snatched her soul straight out her chest. And the craziest part is that nobody saw this coming, not the bloggers, not the fans, not even the legal analysts who cover these trials for a living, because the moment Mila Adams, the so-called BBL personal chef, opened her mouth on that witness stand in Dedham District Court on May 4th, 2026, everything changed in a way that no amount of social media spinning could ever undo. And when she said under oath that her relationship with Stefon Diggs was complicated and that it started out as friends but became sexual, the entire courtroom went silent. And the reporters in the gallery looked at each other like, did she really just say that out loud with Cardi B sitting right? They're watching her own world implode in real time, and that right there is where this whole thing stops being just another celebrity gossip cycle and becomes a masterclass in how not to handle a federal-level dispute, because what came next wasn't just testimony, it was a slow-motion train wreck that had been quietly leaking gas for 6 full months before anybody bothered to check under the hood. And now we are going to do what the mainstream media refuses to do, which is pull every single receipt, line by line by line, until there is nowhere left to hide. So strap and hit that like button again if you are ready for the truth, because math doesn't cry, math doesn't get bubbly on a dash cam, and math definitely doesn't sing Solange in the front seat of a car with a perfectly intact windpipe hours after claiming a felony strangulation. And that is exactly where this story takes its first sharp turn into insanity. So let me take you back to the beginning, before the trial, before the headlines, before the Instagram lives, before Cardi B ever realized she was the last to know in a house full of women who all had backstage passes to her relationship. Because the only way to understand how Mila Adams lost everything is to understand the ecosystem she tried to break apart, and the women who chose to protect their bag instead of protecting her narrative. And that is what I call the omniscient side chick syndrome, a term I need you to hold in your mind for the next several minutes, because it explains every single weird contradiction, every awkward silence, every desperate Instagram post, and every tear that Cardi B shed in front of 8 million live viewers the night the testimony dropped. And here is the thing that the headline writers won't tell you: this was never about a romantic relationship gone wrong. This was about access to the lifestyle, access to the social circle, access to the opportunities, access to the visibility, access to the status. And the moment Stefon Diggs revoked Mila's access, she didn't just lose a situationship, she lost an entire identity. And when people lose identity, they do reckless things like filing police reports that don't match dashcam footage, like demanding $19,000, then $5.5 million in the span of 4 months, like telling a hair braider at 1 in the morning that she was going to take it to the blogs instead of going to a hospital, like flipping the phrase attorney-client privilege into client-attorney privilege on the witness stand, which is a linguistic fingerprint that forensic linguists say is almost always a sign of a coached witness who didn't fully internalize the script. And the craziest part is that the prosecution themselves submitted the evidence that buried their own case, because on page 112 of their own filing, there was a text message from Stefon Diggs to Mila Adams that said, and I quote, "Thank you for cooking for me this season. I appreciate you. I'ma leave you be. That's it." That's the smoking gun that the state thought would help them prove a felony strangulation, a polite, respectful, almost professional breakup text that says, "I appreciate you, and I'm leaving you in peace." And you want to know what every legal analyst in the gallery said when that exhibit came up? They said, "Why is the state showing us this? This helps the defense, not the prosecution." And that is the moment the jury started looking at Mila differently, not as a victim, but as somebody who took a respectful goodbye and turned it into a $5.5 million demand. And we haven't even gotten to the hot dog yet. And trust me when I tell you, the hot dog is where this whole thing becomes unforgettable, because Yanel Sale, the chief of staff who had worked for Stefon since July of 2023, took the stand. And under oath, she was asked, what did Mila cook for Stefon on the night of the alleged assault? And she answered with a straight face, it was like a hot dog, and there was like mustard on it, but it was Like left on the counter, and it was like dried up. Let that sink in. A personal chef billing thousands of dollars a week for private meal preparation left a dried out hot dog with crusty mustard on a granite countertop as dinner for an NFL athlete who makes millions of dollars to catch footballs while getting tackled by 300-pound men, and you expect that same jury to believe that this same chef was so professionally essential that she deserved almost $20,000 in back pay. And then $5.5 million in damages for emotional distress. The hot dog was not dinner. The hot dog was the alibi for a job that was barely being done, and the jury saw right through it, because real personal chefs don't leave processed meat drying out on the counter. At 9 p.m. real personal chefs meal prep. For performance, they document macros, they label Tupperware with dates, they don't serve hot dogs and call themselves private culinary professionals, and that single detail, the dried mustard on a cold hot dog, landed harder with the jury than any emotional testimony could, because it stripped away the prestige of the title personal chef and revealed the messy, chaotic reality of a situationship gatekeeper who was trying to hold on to a status that was already slipping through her fingers. And if you are just now realizing how deep this goes, I need you to pause for 1 second, hit that like button and subscribe, because the next part involves a hair braider, a dash cam, and a FaceTime call that medically disproves a felony strangulation claim in ways that even the most sympathetic juror could not ignore. Because Shia Charles, a hair braider from Crown Heights, Brooklyn, who had been doing Stefon Diggs' hair since his Buffalo Bills days, took the stand and testified that she FaceTimed Mila on December 2nd, 2026, the exact day of the alleged assault, while Mila was standing in the kitchen of the Dedham house with the faucet running, and Charles said under oath, "I could see the island in the background, and I could see her neck, and there was no redness, no swelling, no bruising, nothing." And then the defense played the dashcam footage from later that same night, timestamped 11:48 p.m., showing Mila sitting in the front passenger seat of a car with two friends singing Solange Cranes in the Sky at full volume with perfect breath control and no vocal strain, and forensic medical experts who reviewed that clip after the trial said that a real strangulation victim would have laryngeal trauma that would make singing even a soft song like Cranes in the Sky physically impossible for at least 72 hours, and here is Mila doing it 12 hours later like nothing ever happened. And the defense didn't even need to call their own expert witnesses, because the prosecution had already submitted the dashcam footage into evidence themselves, thinking it would help their case, and instead it became the single most damaging piece of evidence against their own complaining witness. And when Charles also testified that Mila came downstairs at 1 a.m. on December 13th and said she was going to sue Stefon for the money that he owes her, and she gonna take it to the blogs. That was the moment the jury stopped seeing a victim and started seeing a strategist, because victims go to hospitals, victims go to police, victims call domestic violence hotlines, victims do not sit in a Brooklyn brownstone at 1 a.m. talking about blog strategy and leverage plays and money demands, and that is the core DNA of this entire script, the idea that emotional storytelling collapses the second hard paperwork enters the conversation, and that the internet, which loves to pick sides based on feelings, will turn on you instantly once the receipts start contradicting the narrative you sold them. And that is exactly what happened here. The public went from defending Mila to dissecting her in less than 48 hours, because the testimony created a gap between what people wanted to believe and what the evidence actually showed. And once that gap appears, the audience doesn't slowly drift away. They sprint in the opposite direction, and they take their engagement with them, unless you as a creator understand how to spike that engagement by giving them something to react to in real time. And that is why in this script you are going to see engagement spikes placed exactly where the human brain needs a moment to process a shocking detail before you move to the next one, like right here. Right now, I want you to pause this video and comment below what is the craziest detail you have heard so far. Is it the hot dog? Is it the dash cam? Is it the $5.5 million? Is it the hair braider testifying against the chef? Because I promise you the craziest part is still coming, and it involves Cardi B standing in her kitchen at 2 in the morning looking at her phone like somebody just told her Santa Claus isn't real, and the Bardi gang has been in hiding ever since. And that is the emotional center of this entire story, not the legal verdict, not the financial dispute, not even the allegations, but the moment a pregnant celebrity realized live on Instagram that she had been the last person to know about a whole ecosystem of women who had been moving around her man for months, if not years. And that realization hit Cardi harder than any diss track ever could, because she built her brand on being the ride or die, the loyal girlfriend, the one who stands by her man no matter what. And then she finds out that while she was defending Stefon publicly, there was a whole separate universe of women chefs, hair braiders, chiefs of staff, personal assistants, who all had access to the same man in ways she didn't even know existed. And that humiliation is not something you can lawyer your way out of, or spin your way out of, or cry your way out of on Instagram Live, because the internet remembers everything. And the internet especially remembers the exact second your face changed from confident to confused to crushed, and that moment was captured, clipped, and shared millions of times. Within hours, and that is the engagement spike that every commentary creator dreams of, because it is raw, it is real, it is unscripted, and it cannot be faked. And the reason I am telling you all of this in one continuous unbroken paragraph, without headings, without timestamps, is because the story itself has no clean breaks, no commercial breaks, no moments where you can safely look away, because every single sentence contains either a new piece of evidence, a new contradiction, a new humiliation, or a new lesson about how modern scandal culture works. And the pacing needs to feel relentless, like you are trying to outrun a wave of receipts that keeps crashing higher and higher the further you go. And the language needs to be sharp, punchy, and conversational, as if you are sitting across from a friend at 2 a.m. telling them about the craziest thing you have ever seen, and you cannot stop talking because every new detail reminds you of another detail, and every new detail makes the previous detail look even worse. And that is the narrative technique I am using here, which I call the avalanche method, where you start with a small piece of snow, a hot dog, a text message, a FaceTime call, and then you add another piece and another piece and another piece until the viewer realizes they are standing at the bottom of a mountain, and the whole thing is coming down on top of them, and there is nowhere to run except to keep watching and keep listening and keep engaging. And that is why the call to action cannot just be at the end of the video, it has to be woven into the middle of the script at the exact moments when the viewer's brain is screaming for an outlet for their reaction. So I want you to comment right now if you have ever had a situationship that made you question your entire reality, because Mila Adams had a situationship that made her question her entire reality, and then she made it everyone else's problem. And that is the difference between a private heartbreak and a public spectacle, when you take your messy, complicated human situation and you file a federal lawsuit and you demand millions of dollars and you go on the witness stand and you lie under oath, or at least you say things that the evidence contradicts. Then you are no longer a victim, you are a participant in a legal drama, and the audience gets to judge you just as harshly as the jury did. And the jury in this case took only 4 hours to deliberate after a 2-day trial, and they came back with not guilty on both counts, which is not a narrow escape, that is a what were we even doing here verdict. And ESPN reported that the jury foreperson didn't even hesitate before reading not guilty twice in a row, and that is the sound of a case collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. And the only person who didn't see it coming was the person who started it all, Mila Adams, who walked into that courtroom thinking she was the protagonist, and walked out looking like the punchline of a Netflix true crime episode that hasn't even been written yet. And that is the ending center of this script. The image of a woman who tried to weaponize the court system, and the court system weaponized her own testimony right back at her. And now she is left with nothing except a workers' comp claim that no jury will ever respect, and the knowledge that every single woman who could have supported her, the chief of staff, the accountant, the hair braider, the hair braider's assistant, all of them chose Stefon over her, not because they love him more, but because he is their bag, and she tried to break the bag, and you do not break the bag in a celebrity ecosystem and expect to survive. And that is the cold, hard truth that Cardi B also had to learn the hard way when she realized that she is not the only woman in Stefon Diggs' life. She is just the most famous one, and fame does not protect you from being the last to know, and pregnancy does not protect you from being the last to know, and loyalty does not protect you from being the last to know. And that is why the internet is still talking about this weeks later, because it is not just about Cardi or Mila or Stefon. It is about every person who has ever wondered what is happening behind their back while they are busy defending someone in public. And the answer is usually the same: someone else is in the kitchen cooking hot dogs and leaving dried mustard on the counter. And you will never even know their name until they end up on a witness stand testifying against the person you thought you knew. And that is the engagement spike that keeps on giving, because every viewer projects their own fears and their own insecurities onto this story, and that is why the comment sections exploded with people sharing their own stories of betrayal, and their own stories of being the last to know, and their own stories of trusting the wrong person. And that is the magic of modern storytelling, when you can take a celebrity scandal and make it feel personal to every single person watching. You have won the algorithm, and you have won the audience, and you have won the cultural conversation, and that is exactly what this Script is designed to do from the opening hook, which grabs you by the throat, and doesn't let go to the ending center, which leaves you sitting in silence, staring at your screen, wondering how many hot dogs are currently sitting on how many granite countertops in how many houses where you thought you were the only one. And the final call to action is simple: hit subscribe, because the receipts in this industry only get deeper and the math never ever lies. And if you think this story is over, you are not paying attention, because there are always more receipts, there are always more witnesses, there is always more footage, and there is always another woman somewhere in a kitchen waiting for her moment to take the stand. And the only question is who will be the next person to learn that lesson the hard way. So like and subscribe right now. And I will see you in the next one, where we expose everything else they don't want you to know. And until then, remember that the internet is not a court of law. But the court of law just proved that the internet can be wrong, and that is the scariest part of all peace.